Does German automotive history need to be rewritten? Where would the Volkswagen Group be today if it weren't for Porsche's Jewish co-founder Adolf Rosenberger?
Without Adolf Rosenberger, there would not have been a Porsche company today.
Germany's dark Nazi history is also closely linked to that of the German auto industry. But had it not been for Adolf Rosenberger, a German Jew, many iconic cars would never have made it onto the road.
VW certainly wouldn't exist. Without the support and expertise of Adolf Rosenberger, it wouldn't have been possible.
Yet while Ferdinand Porsche and his son Ferry have their place in the automotive history books, Adolf Rosenberger was simply forgotten.
But he was forgotten on purpose, because talking about him was also a direction to talk about the Nazi time.
He was removed, and he slowly but surely was not there anymore.
But now a new study and book commissioned by the Adolf Rosenberger Foundation and Porsche finally revisits the car manufacturer's Nazi-era history from its Jewish co-founder's perspective.
In 1935, Adolf Rosenberger was forced out of this company because in 1935 having a Jewish co-partner was bad for business.
Admitting that you have done wrongful things also means rewriting history.
For me, Porsche's history doesn't need rewriting.
No. For us, the present study is a sound corroboration and fills in the many gaps in the company's early history.
In 1931, Ferdinand Porsche founded an engineering office in Stuttgart, together with his son-in-law Anton Piëch and Adolf Rosenberger. After the Nazis seized power, Rosenberger was coerced into giving up his share in the company. Not long after, he was arrested, sent to a Gestapo prison and then to a concentration camp. Following his release, he then fled to France and eventually to California, where he and his wife Anna lived until his death at the age of 67. Sandra Esslinger is Adolf Rosenberger's great niece. She and her family were very close to Rosenberger and his wife during their time in Los Angeles.
Aunt Anne, as I called her, Anna, she was part of my life, my whole life. And she told me the stories. And I felt a great loss because, he was being erased before her very eyes and ours. And so there was a point at which you want to make sure that it doesn't completely disappear.
When Anna died, she left Sandra Esslinger's family valuable documents belonging to Adolf Rosenberger. They shed an entirely new light on the story that Porsche had told until then. Sandra Esslinger published these documents together with German journalists. Then in 2019, she teamed up with lawyer Christoph Rückel and a number of family members to found a non-profit company bearing Rosenberger's name. Its aim is to finally reveal the true story of his role in Porsche's history.
I always compared our endeavor as David versus Goliath. We were the David and Porsche the Goliath. But the Goliath, Porsche, was in a very special situation because as I remember, in September 22, they prepared the IPO, going to the stock exchange.
In 2022, Dutch historian and journalist David de Jong was also researching the background of the Porsche Piëch company. His book, Nazi Billionaires, The Dark History of Germany's Wealthiest Dynasties, took a critical look at German industry during the Nazi era and prompted Porsche to reassess its conduct towards Rosenberger.
Because they had no choice. At the time that my book was published, Nazi Billionaires, which also details the Porsche Piëch family, they were doing an investor roadshow in the run-up to the IPO of Porsche. Institutional investors in the US and the UK were starting to ask questions about the lies that Porsche had told, that Porsche Piëch had told about him and the Porsche history, investors were asking, well, if you're going to lie about your history, are you also going to lie about your financials?
Certainly, books like David de Jong's also added pressure.
With the pressure mounting on Porsche, the company made an agreement with the Adolf Rosenberger Foundation. Independent historian Joachim Scholtesek would write an analysis of the Rosenberger case. He was given access to both documents from the Porsche archive as well as material in the possession of Sandra Esslinger. Scholtesek spent 2 years delving into the life of Adolf Rosenberger. Born into a Jewish family in Pforzheim, in 1931 he raised the money Ferdinand Porsche needed to open his engineering office.
Without that money, the company in this form wouldn't exist. And I believe it's also important to note that Adolf Rosenberger wasn't just the one who provided the financing. He also kept the place running. While raising the funds, he also went along to the various companies like Wanderer and Zündab because he was someone who knew how to negotiate.
Adolf Rosenberger was well connected in the automotive scene because he was also one of Germany's top racing car drivers. In the 1920s, he clinched a series of victories for Mercedes' factory team, together with his friend and teammate Rudolf Caracciola. Rosenberger's trophies are housed in the archives of Pforzheim's City Museum, where they're now cared for by his great-nephew Hartmut Wagner. Through his grandmother, the sister of Adolf Rosenberger's wife Anna, many important documents from the Porsche co-founder's life have found their way into his hands. Hartmut Wagner has spent decades analysing his great-uncle's life by reading old letters and watching videos, like Rosenberger's last interview with German public broadcaster ZDF in 1966.
To get development going, we opted to set up the engineering office in Stuttgart at Kronenstraße 24. After our model, there was this first so-called Volkswagen being developed at the Zündabwerke in Nuremberg. This car already had most of the characteristics of the later, fully formed Volkswagen.
The development of VW is unimaginable without him. He was a consummate race car driver and car mechanic. But what bothered my great-uncle so much is that, factually speaking, he influenced how the cars were constructed, everything, what the real innovations were. Those ideas actually came from him, but no one ever gave him his due.
Along with ideas for the later VW Beetle, Rosenberger laid the groundwork for another major Porsche project. He ensured that in Auto Union's Silver Arrow, the engine would be placed behind the driver. He drew his inspiration from Mercedes' rear-engined teardrop car from the 1920s.
He was passionate from everything that I've been told about the rear-engine, mid-engine car. He drove the Tropfenwagen and was very successful in the Tropfenwagen, and I think he was passionate about the mid-engine. And those were definitely stories that we had at the table and, dinner table.
In July 1935, Rosenberger was compelled to sign over his 10% share in Porsche to Ferdinand's son Ferry for a fraction of its actual value. The company was making big profits thanks also to Adolf Hitler having commissioned Porsche to build a mass-produced people's car. The KDF, or Strength Through Joy car, would later become the Volkswagen Beetle.
In 1935, it was already likely that the KDF-Wagen, the Volkswagen, would be a success. And at that moment, Adolf Rosenberger was forced out of the company. And that's something where Holocaust researchers and Nazi-era experts will say it's not so much Aryanization as de-Jewification. Meaning, he didn't do it voluntarily.
It is, per definition, an Aryanization.
A result of Ferdinand Porsche trying to appease Nazi leader Adolf Hitler?
They didn't have to do it. In 1935, the pressure from above wasn't that great yet. They had enough room for maneuver not to take this step in July 1935. Yet Ferdinand Porsche took that step.
Joachim Scholtesek's study now presents uncomfortable truths for Porsche to explain. A case of the means being justified by the ends, i.e. corporate growth. What was Porsche's stance towards the Nazi regime?
To be successful, Porsche probably had no other choice at that time than to comply with the regime. Unlike many other companies, Porsche was always publicly associated with the Nazis. And when you have that image and embrace that opportunism, then these things are more or less a logical, albeit unfortunate, consequence.
And Porsche's fortunes certainly rose under the Nazis. The construction of the Auto Union racing car was hugely subsidized, and during the Second World War, the company used its new car factory to make jeeps and tanks. As for Rosenberger, in 1935 he was sent to the Kislau concentration camp, where he endured days of beatings before a colleague secured his release. Rosenberger fled to Paris, but because his contacts were so vital, he still worked for Porsche from abroad.
Then I received a letter saying that the company was no longer able to uphold my contract, on instructions from above. And they also were no longer able to correspond with me. That was basically the termination of our relationship.
Logically, and I think rightly, he himself considered the way they forced him out to be fraudulent, although he'd never have said it. But you can see from the video how he's constantly moving his head from side to side, and that was an expression of emotion.
Adolf Rosenberger later emigrated to the US. In 1943, he became an American citizen and changed his name to Alan Robert. He married fellow émigré Anna Junkert, who had been Ferdinand Porsche's secretary in the 1930s. After the war, the couple made regular visits to West Germany, usually staying with his great-nephew's family in Pforzheim.
Uncle Al came to see if he could gain a foothold in Germany again. He hoped to be able to find some line of work with Porsche again, but they declined contact.
Starting in 1948, the first car to bear the Porsche name was based on the KdF Wagen, the Porsche 356. And Porsche signed cooperation agreements with the Volkswagen plant in Wolfsburg, where the Beetle was now rolling off the assembly lines. But for Porsche, Rosenberger was history.
I'm trying to put myself in Ferdinand Porsche's shoes. For him, his Beetle concept is great. And he doesn't need Adolf Rosenberger.
His erasure. I think he saw it happen during his lifetime. That he was removed. The books he annotated to show where he wasn't and where he was. And he slowly but surely was not there anymore. And he watched it.
In 1949, Rosenberger sued Porsche to reclaim his stake. At the time, Porsche was worth an estimated 1.2 million Deutschmarks. Rosenberger was in the US, caring for his sick wife, so his German lawyer accepted a settlement without consulting him, 50,000 Deutschmarks and a VW Beetle.
We're talking about the kind of disrespect that's impossibly hurtful. When you've had so much success and supported people in good faith. I think that after the war he was simply a broken man, because he evidently had no prospects or reason to stay in America.
In the United States, you're still a little bit of an outsider. But then moving back to your home after Nazi Germany, you're also an outsider. So he was, in a certain way, heimatlos, even after the war.
After Ferdinand Porsche's death in 1951, Adolf Rosenberger tried again to rejoin the business with Porsche's son, Ferry. He hoped to at least manage US sales of the Porsche 356.
The ironic thing, in the end, it wasn't the firm's persecuted Jewish co-founder and German emigre Adolf Rosenberger who brought the prize name of Porsche to America, but it was Prinzing, a former SS Hauptsturmführer. Ferry Porsche teamed up with him to market the first Porsche sports car.
Albert Prinzing, Porsche co-managing director, chose American car importer Max Hoffman to be the company's US representative instead. Prinzing, an old school friend of Ferry's, wasn't the only one on the Porsche board who'd made a career for themselves in the Nazi-era Third Reich.
There was a continuity of money, power and ideology from the Third Reich to West Germany. And of course, Ferry Porsche is probably the best example of that, right? Because he was a voluntary SS officer who surrounded himself with former high-ranking SS officers in the Porsche boardroom. And it is important to note that Ferry Porsche, in his autobiography, spewed virulent anti-Semitic vitriol about Adolf Rosenberger.
Now, alongside the Porsche family's historical recollections, there's finally a book from a different perspective, one that reflects Adolf Rosenberger's point of view. So does Porsche's history now deserve a rewrite?
In mancher Hinsicht schon.
In some respects, yes. Because there's basically nothing about Adolf Rosenberger being the co-founder of this engineering company.
Gewesen ist, gibt es im Grunde genommen nichts.
For me, Porsche history doesn't need rewriting, but an important aspect, the history of Adolf Rosenberger, is now being comprehensively covered for the first time.
The book would at least definitely get the message out to the public in our museum shop too, but there won't be any special exhibition about Adolf Rosenberger.
But why not? Surely the new book will prompt further efforts towards a proper and contemporary analysis of the company's own history. The Adolf Rosenberger Foundation plans to promote the upcoming English translation at events in the US and is working with non-profit associations in Germany and elsewhere to make Rosenberger's story better known worldwide.
As the saying goes, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Is show these stories, is have these stories to be very widespread, is learn from history.
History isn't relevant at any moment in time unless it is relevant in the present. And the current situation we're in this world, I think it's essential we understand what fascism is and what it does to people. And Adolf Rosenberger is a great moment right now for that.
Without Jewish co-founder Adolf Rosenberger, Porsche's cars might never have got off the drawing board. He was pivotal to the production of some of the German auto industry's most iconic models. Yet, to this day, his contribution hasn't been given its rightful place in the history books. What do you think? How should Porsche and VW deal with their Nazi-era past? Let us know in the comments.